Memorandum condemning and combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States. For all people of all races, national origins, and ethnicities is crucial to guaranteeing the safety and security of American people. During the virus, disease, pandemic, inflammatory and xenophobic rhetoric has put Asian American and Pacific Islanders, persons, families, communities, and businesses at risk. And I'm going to ask a question. We're dying. The police are literally killing us in the streets. And we have a memo for the Asians. The federal government must recognize that it has played a role in furthering these xenophobic sentiments through the actions of political leaders, including references to by the geographic location of its origin. So referring to it by the geographic location of its actual origin is wrong. And I just, like, as he's condemning that their political leaders have played a role, let me just ask you a small question. How many political leaders over the last few years got caught doing blackface? I mean, anybody? And we're talking about a political leader who referred to the virus by its geographical location of its origin. Okay. We've had whole presidents do and should call us everything but a child of God. And never has there been an apology, much less a memo.
Say, well, you can't have a poll tax. They can say you can't have a gas tax or cigarette tax or anything else. The federal government's telling the states pretty tough what their business is. Now, you can say that they can't discriminate, but I've got to prove that it discriminates, and I can't prove it in Texas. There are more niggers voting there than there are white folks. There are more of them buying poll taxes than there are white folks. Higher percentage of them. And I can't show that the literacy test is discriminate against because they haven't got any. They got no test at all. Just by God, anybody that can get up and pay $1.06 can vote.
Such statements have stoked unfounded fears and perpetuated stigma about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and have contributed to increasing rates of bullying, harassment, and hate crimes against AAPI persons. Bullying. We sat here and watched a police officer kneel on a black man's neck for 8 minutes. And we are talking about bullying, harassment, and what they call hate crimes. Because I've already told you guys all the time, they never call what happens to us lynchings. They never call them hate crimes. We never get titles like that. So we can't say, you know, compare us with the hate crimes because we don't get titles like hate crimes. Okay? That's reserved for I don't know who, but it's definitely not reserved for us. Okay. Yes, AAPI persons. These actions defy the best practices and guidelines of public health officials, have caused significant harm to AAPI families and communities that must be addressed. Oh, really? It must be addressed. They don't address nothing that happened to black people. Okay. Unless you want to lump a whole bunch of people in with us. Okay. This, when it comes to giving us something, see, when it comes to whooping our ass and when it comes to killing us in the streets, they've reserved that for us specifically. But when it comes to trying to do something to help us, all of a sudden it's a gumbo and a melting pot. Despite the increasing acts of intolerance, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have made our nation more secure during the and throughout our history. Really? We built it. We built the whole country. The culture, the food, the buildings, the roads, the plumbing. We built it. An estimated 2 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have served on the front lines for this crisis as healthcare providers, first responders, and in other essential roles. Did they get paid? Did these people get paid? Because if they got paid, that's already different. Here's my thing. They chose to be here. You're different. You were living where you were living, and you said, you know what? I want to go to the United States for whatever reason. I'm not here to judge your reason or tell you about your reason or what. That's not my business. I don't care. Okay? And then, let me finish. Child, let me finish reading. Let me just finish. Now, you chose to come here. And you took jobs that paid you money. You signed on the dotted line. You agreed to work there. You got paid your money. You were not enslaved. So don't compare the two. Not ever. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not in the future. Not ever. Because when we built this country, we built it for free. We still have not been paid. Yes, the federal government should combat racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans, no matter the background, the language they speak, or religious beliefs. They should be treated with dignity. By the authority vested in me, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it hereby as follows. Condemning racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, the federal government has a responsibility to prevent racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against against everyone in America. Oh, except black people. Including Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. My administration condemns and denounces acts of racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against AAPI. Combating Section 2, combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall, in coordination with, Health Equity Task Force, consider issuing guidance describing best practices for advancing cultural competency and language access and sensitivity towards Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in context to the federal government's response. In developing such guidance, the Secretary should consider the best practices set forth by public health organizations and experts for mitigating racially discriminatory language in describing the pandemic. Okay? It goes on to talk about how the executive department and agencies shall take all appropriate steps to ensure that official actions, documents, and statements, including those that pertain to the pandemic, do not exhibit or contribute to racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against AA. So they rewriting. So our Asian vice president wants to make sure that in the history books that it does not say the things that Trump said. And we just gonna leave it there. Because we got so much more to go through. Oh, Mary Sunshine. Oh, I remember that too. Mary Sunshine says, I remember an Asian beat 2 black women in the nail salon. I remember that too. I don't know why. It's so vivid in my mind. I don't know why that is. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so executive order on advancing racial equality, racial equity and support for underdeserved communities through federal government. Sign up for free text alerts. You can find the link in my bio or in the description.